I'm Diana. Standing in the backyard on the 4th of July, surrounded by family, I felt a mix of shock and relief. My grandfather, Mr. Thompson, had just opened a manila folder and laid bare the truth about my college fund. The air was thick with tension as he calmly presented the evidence of my father's financial misdeeds. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a small town called Maplewood. It was a place where everyone knew each other and the sense of community was strong. My father, Mr. Davis, worked as a manager at a local bank. He was a well-respected man in the community, always presenting a calm and composed exterior. My mother, Mrs. Davis, was a schoolteacher. She was warm-hearted on the surface, but I later realized she had a knack for emotional manipulation. I have an older brother named Ethan. He's 26 years old, 8 years older than me. Ethan worked as a salesperson at a high-end car dealership. From the outside, we seemed like a typical, happy family. We lived in a nice house with a big yard, and we had a dog named Max. But beneath the surface, there was a clear divide between Ethan's and my treatment in the family. When I was growing up, it was little things at first. Ethan got a brand new bike for his 13th birthday, while I got his old one repainted. When he crashed his car during his junior year of high school, my father replaced it within days. In contrast, when I needed a new laptop for my advanced classes in my sophomore year, my mother told me to use Ethan's old desktop. It still works fine, she said, even though the fan sounded like a jet engine. I didn't resent it too much at the time. I thought that was just how families worked. The older sibling reaches milestones first and needs more resources. So I learned to adapt. I found free online SAT prep courses and applied for every scholarship I could find in the school library. When I turned 16, I got a part-time job at a local coffee shop called Java Haven, making lattes for $9.50 an hour. I was the kid who didn't ask for much, and in my family that meant I didn't get much. But there was one thing I held on to, a promise that had been made to me since I was a baby. My grandfather, Mr. Thompson, a retired financial advisor, opened a $529 education savings plan for me the day I was born. He and my grandmother, Mrs. Thompson, drove all the way from their home in the mountains, a 3-hour journey each way, to give me a card that read, "Welcome to the world, Diana. Your future starts today." He deposited $50,000 into the account that day. Every year on my birthday, Grandpa Thompson would hand me a card at dinner. Inside, in his neat handwriting, was the same message: 1 year closer to your launch pad. And every year he added to the fund. Sometimes it was $5,000, sometimes more. With the help of the market, by the time I was 17, the fund had grown to $224,000. Grandpa told me the amount not to brag, but so I could plan. Know your runway, kiddo, he'd say. Then pick the landing strip. I picked the University of State, an in-state school with a top-notch pre-law program. It was in the top 20 public schools in the country. I turned down partial scholarships from 2 other universities because I knew I had the college fund. I had a plan. When I told my parents I'd committed to the University of State, my father smiled and said, "Good school." My mother said, "We're proud of you." They didn't mention the fund, but I didn't need them to. It had been an unspoken understanding my whole life. Grandpa's money was there for my education. During my senior year, I casually asked my father about the fund twice. Both times, he gave me the same answer: "It's all set. Don't worry about it." What I didn't know was that my father had been added as an authorized signer on the account when I was 3 years old. A small administrative detail that would end up costing me my future. In March of that year, Ethan announced he was getting married. His fiancée, Lily, was 25 years old, with long, blonde hair and very specific ideas about their destination wedding. They wanted to get married in a beautiful beach resort in the Caribbean. I remember asking at dinner one night, "How are you guys affording that?" My father didn't look up from his plate and said, "The resort has a package deal. Ethan and Lily worked it out." My mother added, "Don't worry about your brother's finances, Diana." I noticed some changes around the house. We stopped going out to eat as often, and my father canceled his golf club membership. My mother sold a few pieces of jewelry she'd been holding onto for years. When I mentioned it, she just waved it off and said, "We're being smart with money." The wedding took place over Memorial Day weekend. It was a beautiful event, with 120 guests flown in from all over. There were white flowers everywhere, a live band, and a 5-course dinner with wine pairings. I was a bridesmaid. I bought my own dress and paid for my own flight using the money I'd saved for my part-time job. At the reception, I was sitting at a table near the bar, sipping on a glass of water. Lily's friend leaned over to another bridesmaid and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Ethan's parents basically paid for everything. They insisted." I set down my glass, and a cold feeling settled in my stomach. But I didn't think much about it at the time. 3 weeks later, just before my first semester at the University of State, I was on the porch, waiting for my orientation packet. The mailman came early, and there was no orientation packet, but there was a white envelope from the financial institution that managed my college fund. I shouldn't have opened it. It was addressed to my grandfather, care of my father. But I'd spent 18 years believing that account was mine, so I tore it open without thinking. The statement showed a current balance of $0. I read it 3 times, thinking there must be a mistake. Then I looked at the transaction history. On March 14th, a full liquidation of the account had taken place. The withdrawal amount was $217,438.62, with an early withdrawal penalty of $6,561.38. It was 6 weeks before Ethan's wedding. My hands were shaking as I called the financial institution. A woman named Sarah confirmed everything. An authorized party had initiated the full liquidation in March. "Ma'am, the penalty was applied because it wasn't used for qualified education expenses," she said. When I asked who authorized it, she could only tell me it was an authorized signer on the account. I sat on my bed, looking at my acceptance letter from the University of State, the orientation packet I'd printed and highlighted, and the poster of the campus I'd hung on my wall. My $224,000 was gone. No one had said a word to me. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. That night, I did the math. The in-state tuition at the University of State was roughly $16,000 per semester, or $32,000 a year. Over 4 years, that was at least $128,000. Add in room, board, books, and fees, and it was closer to $200,000 in total. Federal student loans for freshmen maxed out at $5,500. Even with a mix of subsidized and unsubsidized loans, I could maybe borrow $27,000 a year. That left a huge gap. I'd already turned down other schools, and the deadlines had passed. Deferring a year would mean losing my housing assignment and my momentum. My savings account had only $2,800, barely enough for textbooks. If I took out $128,000 in student loans at 12% interest over 20 years, I'd end up paying back roughly $230,000, almost the exact amount that had been taken from my college fund. I knew I had to confront my parents. I brought the bank statement to dinner and set it on the table between the salt shaker and the casserole dish. "Can you explain this?" I asked. My father looked at the statement, then at me, then at my mother. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Finally, my father cleared his throat and said, "Ethan needed a good start to his marriage. A man has to provide for his wife." My mother put down her fork and said, "Why are you making this about money? We've raised you, fed you, and given you a roof over your head for 18 years. You can take loans like everyone else." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd been promised this money for my education. They'd broken their word. I stood up, picked up the statement, and carried my plate to the sink. My mother called after me, "Diana, don't be dramatic." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was making a decision. The next morning, I woke up to several missed calls from my aunts and uncles. They'd all heard my mother's version of the story. She told them I was throwing a fit about money and being ungrateful. When I called my Aunt Lisa back, she said, "Diana, your mother told me what happened. You're being a little materialistic. Families make sacrifices." I was so frustrated. No one seemed to care where the money had come from or what it meant to me. That afternoon, my mother came into my room without knocking. She sat on the edge of my bed and said, "I know you're upset, but you need to think about the bigger picture. Ethan is starting a new life. You're young. You have time." I couldn't believe she was still trying to justify what they'd done. "Time doesn't pay tuition," I said. She sighed and said, "Do you know how much your father and I sacrificed for that wedding? We cut back on our own expenses." I replied, "You sacrificed my savings, not yours." That evening, Ethan FaceTimed me. He was sitting in his new apartment, looking comfortable. "Look, I didn't ask them to use your fund. That was their call," he said. But I knew he must have known something. "You didn't ask where the money for the $150,000 wedding was coming from?" I asked. He shifted in his chair and said, "I knew they were helping, but I didn't know the specifics." I was so angry. He was acting like he had no responsibility. "You just got married, and I'm left with no way to pay for college," I said. He ran a hand through his hair and said, "You always make everything about you." I almost laughed. The kid who'd always gotten everything he wanted was telling me I was self-centered. That night, my father posted a message in our family group chat saying, "The wedding was a family effort. Let's focus on positive things." Everyone in the group chat agreed, and no one mentioned my college situation. It was like they'd all decided my future didn't matter. I sat in my room, feeling alone and betrayed. But then I thought of my grandfather. He'd always been there for me. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang twice, and then he answered. "Hey, sweetheart. It's late. Everything okay?" I took a deep breath and said, "Grandpa, I need to talk to you about my college fund." He asked if everything was on track for September, and I had to tell him the fund was gone. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Say that again." I told him my father had withdrawn everything in March, and the balance was zero. He asked how much had been in it, and I told him about the $217,000 plus penalties. He was quiet for a while, and I could hear him thinking. Then he said, "Cora, I need you to do something for me. Get that statement," and read me the account number and the exact date of the withdrawal. I read him every line, and he didn't interrupt. In the background, I heard my grandmother ask, "Harold, what's wrong?" He replied, "Get me my laptop." The next morning, Grandpa called me back. He'd been up since 4 a.m. "I logged into the account," he said. "Your father did it, and he had no right to." "That's my account, Diana. Being an authorized signer doesn't mean he owns the money." He then started telling me about other financial requests my father had made over the years. In 2019, he'd asked for $12,000 for Ethan's college tuition gap, but Ethan had dropped out in 2018. In 2021, he'd asked for $18,000 to replace the furnace at our house, but Grandpa had paid for the furnace in 2017. In 2023, he'd asked for $22,000 for Ethan's security deposit on a new apartment, but Ethan was living with Lily at the time and hadn't signed a new lease. Over 15 years, my father had asked Grandpa for roughly $84,000 in supplemental funds. Grandpa could only verify that about $31,000 had gone where my father said it would. The rest, $53,000, he couldn't account for. Grandpa decided to build a case. He called his attorney Mr. Harris, a man he'd known for decades. Mr. Harris confirmed that as the account owner, Grandpa had legal standing to pursue recovery. The withdrawal was unauthorized, non-qualified, and made without his knowledge. The 4th of July cookout was coming up. Grandpa and Grandma usually skipped it because of the long drive, but this year, they RSVP'd. Grandpa asked me to bring the bank statement. "I'm not going there to start a fight," he said. "I'm going to ask questions and bring the answers with me in case your father decides to lie." On July 4th, the day was hot, with the sun shining brightly. My father had the grill going, and there were folding chairs set up in the backyard. About 25 family members and neighbors showed up. Aunt Lisa brought her famous potato salad, and Uncle Tom brought a case of beer. I arrived early, wearing a summer dress and carrying the bank statement in my purse. My mother was in the kitchen, arranging a fruit platter. She smiled at me, the fake smile she reserved for when there were other people around. "Diana, grab the napkins from the garage, will you?" she said. I went to get the napkins and watched my mother work the crowd. She was laughing and chatting with everyone, acting like nothing was wrong. She even told Mrs. Johnson from next door, "Both my kids are doing great. Ethan is married, and Diana is going to college in the fall." It was like she was in denial. Ethan and Lily arrived later. Lily had printed photos from their Caribbean wedding and set them up on the table like trophies. Everyone crowded around, oohing and awing. I sat on the edge of the yard, feeling out of place. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandpa. 20 minutes out. My father walked over and said, "Whatever you're thinking, don't ruin this. It's a family day." I didn't say a word. When Grandpa and Grandma arrived, it was like a breath of fresh air. Grandpa was wearing a polo shirt and khaki pants, and he had a manila folder under his arm. Grandma was wearing sunglasses and a nice dress. They were greeted with hugs and smiles from everyone. My father shook Grandpa's hand, but there was an awkward tension. I could see my father's eyes dart to the folder and then back up. Something shifted in his expression. Midway through the meal, my mother stood up and tapped her fork against her glass. "I just want to say something," she began. "Our family has been through a lot this summer, and there's been some tension. I want to apologize for the misunderstanding about Diana's college fund. We should have communicated better." She went on to say that everything they'd done was for the family and that student loans were normal. Everyone in the yard nodded in agreement, except for Grandpa. He sat there, silent, with both hands flat on the table, watching my mother like an eagle. After my mother finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then Grandpa stood up and said, "Diane, that was nice, but I have some questions." He opened the folder, and the atmosphere in the yard changed. Everyone's attention turned to him. He looked at my father and said, "In March of this year, someone withdrew $217,000 from Diana's 529 education plan, the account I opened. Can you explain that?" The yard went dead silent. My father tried to deflect, saying it wasn't the time or place. But Grandpa didn't back down. "I'm asking a direct question. Did you, or did you not withdraw funds from an account in my name without my authorization?" Aunt Lisa's fork dropped to her plate, and Uncle Tom set down his beer. My mother tried to intervene, but Grandpa kept his eyes on my father. He then started going through the other financial requests my father had made over the years, presenting the evidence he'd gathered. My father's face turned pale. He tried to come up with excuses, but it was clear he was in the wrong. My mother sat there, stunned, as she realized the extent of my father's lies. Lily looked at Ethan and said, "You told me your parents used their own money. You never said it was Diana's college fund." Ethan didn't know what to say. Grandpa then said, "I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came because my granddaughter called me 3 weeks before college and told me she had nothing because my son took what I gave her. I'll be working with my attorney on the financial recovery, and as for Diana's education, Ruth and I will make sure she gets to."